Controversy surrounds the historic practice of grazing cattle in the high country of California's Sierra Nevada. Resolution of this conflict could end the seasonal movement of stock from dry summer foothills to green mountain meadows and forests, which has been practiced for generations. Although federal regulations prohibit degradation of natural resources, some advocates believe that these laws are not effective and are pressing for greater restrictions. The issues at stake include historic traditions, economic survival, environmental protections, and appropriate use of public lands. The future of high country grazing hangs in the balance.
There was livestock coming to the mountains way before there was a Forest Service. The Stanislaus became a forest in 1905, and before that, there weren't grazing allotments per se, but ranchers had been taking their livestock and allowing them to go from their home ranches and drifting up into the mountains seasonally. They would follow the snow, and they would go up to the mountains and stay up there all summer, and then as the snow came, they would turn around and start coming back down the mountain again, and that happened for many, many years before we were a Forest Service. You know, in the old days, that was quite a jaunt from the valley up here, and the families used these cabins. They would stay up here all summer long. Their help would stay up here. Families would pack their cars or wagons or whatever they were using at the time and come up and spend the whole season up here, and they would be very close to their cattle, and it was a great life. And actually the cattle were, in my opinion, taken care of better because somebody was there all the time. As life changed, a lot of our ranchers don't have the flexibility. Some of them have other jobs, and so they don't have the flexibility just to come up here and stay all season. But some of our permittees still hold on to their cabins, and they still come up on a regular basis to administer their permits and to stay at their cabins. And we allow them to keep horses out there so they can still manage their livestock on horseback. A lot of our permittees still have that way of life and still keep their cabins. Some of them are on private land. Some of them are on us that are tied to their permit. We just unloaded some cattle on Highway 20 about a week ago, and we had people pulling over and taking pictures because this is a way that isn't seen that often anymore, and so people are very interested to see the remnants of sort of the old way to bring cattle up.
But some argue that this tradition is detrimental to the Sierra environment.
The key issue, the bottom line when it comes to grazing is grazing permittees bring cows by trucks mostly up into the forest. They let the cows go, and then they return to the valley. They don't stay with their cows and manage them on a regular basis, so the cows drift where there's food, where there's water, and where it's most desirable. So the cows concentrate in areas where there's the luscious vegetation, the most vulnerable streamside areas, and in many cases, critical habitat for many species.
Well, I think the biggest change is just land use. Years ago, there was a set of folks that would come up to the mountains, people who liked to live that outdoor life. It was pretty rugged, it was pretty hardcore camping, and there was only a set of folks that would venture that far, in the vehicles or in wagons and horses. And so there wasn't a lot of people that came up here. Mostly it was our ranchers that would come up here and a few hardy recreationalists. And so over the years, with modern transportation and cities growing all around us, more and more people come up to the mountains to recreate, and everybody has their own vision of what multiple use is. For some people it's hiking, it's fishing, some people it's just quietness, some people bring horses and motorcycles. It's a pretty active forest where we have a lot of use by different users, including our grazing permittees.
So because the cows are unmanaged and they drift wherever they're going to go, There are conflicts that not only affect the plants or affect the water quality, but also conflict with many of the most popular areas for recreation where cows literally are in there depositing bodily waste. And in many cases, there's then more flies, more smells. And even in the most remote areas of the wilderness, there can be cows out there with cowbells that people have come all the way up from Los Angeles or San Francisco to try and get into a wild setting. And a herd of 30 cows will come down in and clang with cowbells all night long.
The mission of the United States Forest Service is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. In contrast to national parks, which preserve landscapes, national forests were established for the public to extract natural resources through logging, mining, and grazing.
We have a good place for cattle to come to use a product, because that's what grass is. It's like timber or anything else. It's a product, and the cattle do well up here. Cattle don't just eat grass. They eat a lot of browse. I mean, really what puts the fat on our cattle on this forest is deer brush. You can tell the difference of the cattle that eat deer brush up here. They slick off in the springtime, which means after the winter they're real hairy and they don't look all that shiny and slick, but you get them up in the mountains drinking good clean water and eating good brush and green grass, and the cattle start putting on weight and they look wonderful. They're going to do really well up here, and they're going to go home nice and fat, ready for a market.
A major challenge is to keep cattle from congregating, from remaining in one area for too long, where they are likely to overgraze or damage stream beds.
There have been a few permittees over the years who have had them out for most of a summer season, but in the vast majority of allotments, the cattle permittees drop off their cows and come up whatever time is most convenient for them to check on their cows.
Well, for the most part, you don't want your livestock to stay in one place. You want your livestock to take in the country and move in a way that doesn't make the livestock concentrate. So what you tend to do is you have water in one place, you have feed in another place, so you would tend to salt in another place so that your cattle are constantly moving and don't concentrate, let's say, in a riparian area. If you put salt near a riparian area, your cattle are going to stay there all day. There's no reason to move. So we try to keep our salting areas away from those meadows and away from riparian areas so that the cattle do a more harmonious move through the mountains.
New solar technology has been used to pump water to water troughs located away from sensitive springs. In the 1990s, a major shift in stewardship goals on federal lands initiated the modern grazing management era. Riparian meadows were identified as critical ecological zones, and conservation goals were regarded equally with livestock production. The Forest Service implemented new regulations, including reducing the number of cattle, specifying the minimum height of grass in meadows, setting dates for beginning and ending of high country grazing season, and fencing off environmentally sensitive areas.
We're constantly out and about looking at our allotments, looking at how the cattle are moving. Are they staying in one spot too long? Are they causing any stream damage? We have a mid-season monitoring where we go out. We have folks, not just range folks, but other folks that are out doing other things that may give us a call and give us a heads up on something that they think we need to look at. This is the Range Wildlife Watershed. You're in the wing of the Forest Service, and in this office we have botanists, soil scientists, we have a hydrologist, we have a fisheries biologist, and 2 range folks, and that's just in this wing. This is a big building, and so other wings will have engineering, public service, which includes heritage, our real estate section. Downstairs is our timber. It takes a village to run this forest for sure. A lot of input from a lot of specialists that help manage a forest.
But above and beyond that, the Forest Service is underfunded and understaffed, and the forest officials who deal with grazing have told our center that in any given year, if they are able to monitor 30 to 40% of the meadows that are supposed to be measured, that's the most they think they can accomplish. And the other 60 to 70%, they ask for the permittees to self-report if they've caused any violations.
We have a great relationship with UC Davis. They've been so instrumental to make sure that the Forest Service is using the best available science. Ken Tate has been really helping us bridge some gaps between the old ways of livestock grazing and new ways to look at the land, water quality, the way that we look at vegetation, how we can better manage livestock on the forest and continue having that on the forest and having a sustainable range program.
There is no question that cows contaminate water. The Tate study shared that it was at levels that were below the threshold. Our studies show completely opposite. They took single samples, they took them at places with the highest flows in areas where we openly acknowledged that we looked for areas where streams were in popular recreation areas, but were low flow streams where cattle hung out. Because the more you have water, dilution is the solution to pollution. It's the standard phrase. The more you have water, the more that the pollution is diluted.
Enforcement of Forest Service regulations has been described as being lax. When monitoring activities identify problems within a particular rangeland allotment, there are often few repercussions.
The political decision-making leaders for the Forest Service at the local level and often at the regional or national level don't want to deal with unnecessary conflict. They don't want to create conflict because it adds to the political conflicts they already deal with. And so again and again, local forest officials here have not enforced grazing regulations that really matter to how long the cows are allowed to stay in an area. And so where is there opportunity for change? It really will come from, at some point, there's likely to be litigation that's going to force the issue. And all of a sudden, similar to spotted owl lawsuits or other things that led to the Forest Service changing its logging practices, at some point, the Forest Service permittees are going to face, we can't keep doing what we're doing because of either an endangered species or because of a water quality issue. And at that point, there may be opportunity to look for new practices.
Federal funding is stimulating studies to repair and restore damaged habitats. In the Stanislaus National Forest, Matley Meadow overlaps public and private lands. In 2014, a consortium of ecologists, archaeologists, Forest Service personnel, ranchers, restoration contractors, environmentalists, and members of the local business community visited the site to analyze the meadow's current condition and discuss methods for restoration. Such collaboration of public, private, and local stakeholders is critical for success. What is the future of cattle grazing in the Sierra Nevada?
Well, I'm a great optimist. I think it will continue, and I'm constantly inspired. One of the things that gets me excited is when I see the next generation coming into this business, going to school and taking range management and coming out as a range con. Some of them come to work for us, but some of them go back on the land and take new concepts, new thinking, new science, and keep that industry current and vitalized and sustainable. And so that's what makes me have high hopes that we'll be having livestock in the mountains on Forest Service land for a long time to come.
So our center believes that the key issues with livestock grazing are the fact that cows don't get managed in the national forest, they're not having active herding on a regular basis, and so they crumble the stream banks, contaminate the water, and often, in many cases, overgraze the riparian vegetation that is so important for many wildlife species. There can be ways to resolve those controversies by having fewer cows in areas that are more vulnerable, or having cows there only for a shorter part of the summer-long season and forcing the cows to move after 2 weeks into a different part of the allotment.
It sounds like sometimes that we all want something different, but really when people sit down together and talk about what it is they want, the ranchers and the environmentalists and really the public that uses this forest really want the same things. And once they can sit down and talk about the things that they have in common and they start brainstorming about what they can do to keep those things, a lot of those issues go away and we start working together in a more productive way. Instead of finding things that we disagree on, we find things that we have in common. We've worked together with a lot of groups that really at one time thought cattle grazing was the end of public land, but have come around to find that cattle grazing really is a positive thing. Grazing has been around a long time, way before cattle were here, and it's a natural function of keeping a sustainable forest. So my view is that it may be a hard road and sometimes it's a give and take, and we'll find ways to do it better. But I think we'll resolve those issues.